We thank you. We thank you for this seminar. We thank you, Jehovah. Thank you for everything. Thank you for our lives. Thank you for our parents. Thank you for the provisions. Father, we pray that you come and be with us in everything that you are going to do, in what you are going to teach us, Father. We pray that you open our minds, that you sharpen us, Father, so that we can learn and get everything that we are going to be taught. We prayed and believe through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. I'm going to disable some features. And then in case of anything, you'll ask for permission in order for you to be able to say something. We want to welcome all the schools that have joined us. So far I'm seeing 21 schools that have joined, and many others are still on the way to join. I want to welcome our facilitator, Teacher Okelo, who is already on the call. Teacher Okelo, you are most welcome, and kindly take over the session.
All right. Is that okay? All right. Thank you so much, Teacher Stephen. My name is Teacher Okelo. I'll be your teacher for this session. I am a teacher of history, and currently I teach at Taiba International School here in Entebbe. That's where I am. I believe you are all senior sixes. Do we have some senior fives? Are we having some senior fives in class? I'm sure they are there. So we shall be moving slowly by slowly as we discuss our things here. Are you seeing the work I'm sharing, Teacher Stephen? I'm sharing.
Go back to the lectures. Go back to the lectures.
Yes. You can see what I'm sharing?
Yes.
All right. Yes. So you can see this is our part of what we are going to be doing. I wanted to first take you through the different type of questions. Right. So how many types of questions? And I want us to first run through them very fast. In senior 6 or throughout A-level, we have the first type of question. We have this very simple and direct question. For example, that one. Account for the outbreak of the French Revolution of 1789. That is a very simple question. All you need to do is you write an introduction, of course, the body, and then the conclusion. Like we all know that in A-level, you have to answer by writing an essay, and an essay has 3 parts: the introduction, the body, and the conclusion of the question. That is a very simple question. It is direct and very simple to interpret. Then the second type of question we have, the synthesis questions, which is usually two-sided. This kind of question is two-sided but also direct. For example, if they ask you, examine the causes and effects of the French Revolution of 1789. Now, this question is very direct. It doesn't require a standpoint in most cases, but if you wish, you can put. So this is another kind of question where you need to write the introduction, of course, then you're going to go to the body, and then eventually you're going to go to the conclusion. So if you look at this question, it looks like it is in 2 parts, but actually it is in 3 parts. I don't know whether you get the 3rd part. We are looking at the causes and effects of the French Revolution. Who can tell me where the third part of the question is? Who is able to see the third part of the question? Can I get some response? Yes. Can I get some response? Where is the third part of the question? Yes. So the third part of the question is, we have the causes of the French Revolution, of course. Then we have the effects of the revolution, and the effects of the revolution are both positive and negative. You see? So in other words, the third part of the question comes now if you are going to separate the negative from the positive effects of the revolution. So that's why I'm saying that the question is in 3 parts. You see? So that is the reason why I said that. So now let us go to the other type of question. The other type of question is indirect questions. Where indirect questions here mean that the question is not very easy to interpret. It is usually full of grammar and a lot of English. This kind of question is a high order question. This type of question is not easy to interpret, and this type of question is demanding in terms of time. For example, if you look at the previous question I talked about that has 3 parts, the causes and effects of the French Revolution. That question is also demanding in terms of time, but this one is more demanding. It is more demanding because it is a high order question and it requires a lot of reasoning and someone who has understood the content very well. Like in this question here, the violation of the 1814 Constitutional Charter was primarily responsible for the collapse of the restored Bourbon monarchy in France. That question is a high order question. That question is an argumentative type of question. That question requires you to have understood the content very well. That question requires a standpoint. So this is now another type of question that requires a lot of content. And then you have this other one, ambiguous questions. These are questions that should be avoided. These are questions that sometimes come from very dry content areas. For example, the restored Bourbon monarchy learned nothing and forgot nothing. Discuss. In other words, it looks easy, but when you start writing this question, it is not very easy to place your argument. So that kind of question should be avoided. Then you have this other one, the controversial questions. Now, the questions that are controversial are those ones that do not have specific answers. You can easily get the answer from this area and you can again get it from another area. For example, why did the Bolsheviks take over power in Russia in 1917? For people who have done the Russian Revolution, you notice that that question can be answered if you give the causes of the Russian Revolution. At the same time, the question can be answered if you give the reasons for the success of the Russian Revolution of 1917. At the same time, the same question can also be answered if you give both the causes of the revolution and the reasons for the success of the revolution. So the question is not very clear in many ways. And then we have the original questions. These are questions that someone sits down and then sets it, and the answers are there, and you have never seen it anywhere, whether in the question bank or in any exam that you've done. Those questions can appear. So those questions can be there. For example, I just thought of this one here. Account for the success of the French Revolution. Many times you don't teach reasons why the revolution succeeded, but you teach the effects of the revolution. So if someone asks you why the revolution succeeded and refers to the 1789 French Revolution, it can actually be an original question, which is not very easy to find the answer. Not easy to find the answer. So those are the different type of questions that are common. I know there are other types of questions that are also there, but maybe for now we can concentrate on those ones. Then let's see what every student must know. If you're a student of history, these are issues that you must not be struggling with. For example, do you understand that answering a paper or answering a question at this level, you need to know the interpretation, you also need to know the approach, and you also need to know how to go about the question. So it's very important that we know the interpretation of the question, because that's where the marking starts. So if you don't know how to interpret, then how are you going to answer the question you can't interpret? So interpretation is key to everything you're going to be doing. Also, a student should know that an introduction should be written. Some students avoid writing the introduction, but the truth is, an essay without an introduction is like an essay without an introduction is like you go and then join somewhere and then you don't talk to people, you know? So an essay should have an introduction. But what should be in the introduction? The introduction is something so simple. It should be answering those basic questions like when did the event take place? Maybe where did it take place? Who was there by the time the event was taking place? In other words, I'm talking about our famous W's. What, where, when, those questions. So by the time you finish answering those basic questions, you will have actually introduced what you want to write about. So the introduction should be brief and precise. Don't write a very bulk introduction, because the bulk introduction will not add your marks. The marks will be coming from the body of the essay. The points that you write, the explanation that you give is what is going to give you the marks. Of course, if you have interpreted the question well, that's what I mean. Every student should also know that a point should be stated in a full sentence. A point should be stated in a full sentence, and you can state the point in many ways, but there are two popular and simple ways. You can start the point, mentioning the point, and follow it with the building words, or you can start with the building words and you end with the point. For example, if you are talking about the rise of Napoleon, and luck is the factor you want to speak about, you could say, luck was one of the factors that led to the rise of Napoleon to power in France, full stop. Or you could say, one of the factors that led to the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte in France was luck. So if you end with the point luck, it means you have started with the building words. If you start with luck and then you end up with other words, those are now building words. So the sentence should be full and should make meaning historical. And by the way, write history in the past tense. So if you are stating that point about the rise of Napoleon and luck is the point, you would say one of the factors that led to the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte was luck. Or you could say luck was one of the factors that led to the rise of Napoleon. So after you have mentioned that statement or stated that point in a full sentence like that, then you have to explain. So how do you explain? You explain by answering the question, how? If you claim that Napoleon's rise was as a result of luck, so how can you explain and illustrate how luck helped Napoleon to become a leader in France? So you're going to give us different scenarios where luck was at work and it was in favor of Napoleon until when Napoleon rose to power. Right. Also, students should be aware that as you write your essay, you should be creative. You should not be and sound monotonous in your essay. You see, like some people who write one of the factors that led to the rise of Napoleon was luck. The next paragraph, one of the factors that led to the rise of Napoleon was another thing. Another point, one of the factors. So one of the factors becomes one of the factors. Can we be creative so that your essay does not look monotonous? So you need to be creative. Students also should be aware that they should not mix their point with the explanation. There are students who identify the point, but before they put a full stop, they're already explaining. In other words, put a full stop after the sentence, then you start explaining. You see? So that when someone reads your essay, someone can see that the point has been identified, the point is in a full sentence, and the point has been explained in other sentences. So don't mix your point with explanation. Also, students should be aware that they should not write shortcuts in their essay. Shortcuts are statements and words like whereby, in that, wherein. Those are shortcuts, so we don't expect you to write them. Then you have, students must learn to relate the point to the question by using simple catchwords. Simple catchwords like hence, therefore, thus. In other words, those are statements you write at the end of your explanation. Maybe you're talking about how luck led to the rise of Napoleon. So at the end of it, you're going to say, hence, the rise of Napoleon. Therefore, the rise of Napoleon. Those things. Don't write abbreviations in your examinations. You also should know how to state your standpoint. I hope we know how to state the standpoint. It should be in measurable terms. You say, to a greater extent, a smaller extent, a bigger extent, and we should know where to place the standing point. Students should also know that you should not mix issues of the different papers. Some of us do paper 1 and paper 3. Don't bring in your paper 1 in paper 3. Don't bring in your paper 6 in paper 3. Make sure you keep the content in the areas where they are. All questions carry equal marks. So all questions carry equal marks, people. Make sure that you make the right choice. What are you doing? We're making a small adjustments here. So I'm saying all questions carry equal marks, and students should know that you should start with the easiest question for yourself. And students should know where to put the standpoint and how to phrase it. Students should know what a joinery statement is. In other words, that statement you write to connect your introduction to the essay. For example, you say that the French Revolution was caused by the following factors. Did you know that that is a very important part of the essay? That we as people who are looking for your answers, we are actually looking for that. If you don't have it, then we now take you as someone who is not aware. So if you are not aware, then we are not going to do it. We are not going to give you marks for that. Remember, the marking here is by impression. So do not fail to do it. Do not fail to write those issues there. Right, so let us now continue to the next thing. I wanted us to see the examination terminologies. Terminologies used in asking questions. For example, how far, to what extent, how practical, those statements that are used. Students need to understand before you attack a question, do you understand the demands of the question? Students need to understand the common mistakes that we make as we write our exams. For example, those grammatical errors, sometimes poor time management can be an issue. Sometimes poor explanations, you identify your point very well, but you do not explain. Lack of analysis, bad handwriting, and sometimes presenting untidy work. And then failure to observe chronology as you're doing what? As you're writing your exam. Actually, ideally it should be that every question should start on a fresh page. Yes, start every question on a fresh page so that you minimize the confusion as someone is looking through your work. Also, students need to understand that there are many types of questions. I have already explained the different types of questions. But as you go through your question, be reminded that the areas that the person marking is looking out for. For example, the person marking is looking out for a point that has been identified in a full sentence, like I explained earlier. The explanation should be very clear. Examples should be very clear. And let us separate facts from opinions. Facts are dates, names of places, names of people, names of events. Those are facts. And then opinions these are the issues that we write. So let us not isolate or ignore the facts and then we concentrate on opinions. Remember that this paper is marked by impression, and the impression gets better if you know the facts. Then, of course, as you relate the answer to the question, those words I talked about, hence, therefore, those words, thus, make sure you know how to use them. Then also, candidates should strictly follow the instructions given to avoid the cases of rubric. Rubric here means that you answer either extra or few questions depending on the demands of the question. So answer strictly what the question paper says. So those are the things I felt I should share with you before we dive into these questions. So the first question is there. Account for the European hostility against France in the period 1790 to 1814. You look through those questions. We shall later go into the page that has the answers, but you can see those are the questions. The violation of the 1814 Constitutional Charter was primarily responsible for the collapse of the restored Bourbons. How was Metternich able to dominate Europe from 1815 to 1845, the Metternich era? Explain the process of German unification, that is 1850 to 1871. Then examine the causes and consequences of the Greek War of Independence. Examine to what extent was Serbia responsible for the 1914 to 1918 World War. And then we have the next one there. How did Versailles Peace Treaty undermine European peace between 1919 to 1931? 39. Then account for the survival of fascism in Italy from 1922 to 1944. And then we have assessed the role of Adolf Hitler in the outbreak of World War II. And lastly, how successful was the United Nations up to 1970? So those are the questions we are going to be looking at today. That is like a full paper. And if time allows, we shall be sharing other things also. So the answers to number one, they are there. What you're expected to do. The candidates are expected to identify and explain the causes. You see, explain the causes of hostility against France in the period 1792 to 1814. And the time frame must be respected. In other words, this question brings two topics together: the French Revolution, but also the regime of Napoleon Bonaparte. So they're asking us why European countries were fighting France throughout the French Revolution from 1792 and throughout the Napoleonic era from 1799 up to 1814. So you see, those are the answers you expected to want to do, to give. I don't know whether people are writing these things or they are going to print. But anyway, this material will be shared to you and then you will find what to do with it. So this question doesn't require a standpoint. It is a simple question. It is a direct question. It is the other kind of question I tell you that is easy to interpret. So the first answer is there. European hostility, it is true, it manifested in Europe towards France, beginning from 1792 all the way through up to 1814. And the reasons are many. You can see the ideological differences and republicanism and then monarchy. In other words, whereas France believed so much in republicanism and liberty, the monarchies around Europe by then were still believers in monarchism and conservatism. That explains why they formed the first coalition, they formed the second coalition, and even the third coalition against, against France. So they were fighting because of ideological differences. Then also the rise of war parties, i.e. all parties supported war for selfish reasons. This should be war parties. There were many war parties in Europe. We had France fighting with the different countries in different directions. So these people were fighting France for selfish reasons. Britain had her own reason for fighting. Also, other countries had their own reasons for fighting. But I think the major reason here was the success of the French Revolution. The success of the French Revolution made many countries scared and ended it in war. Then the civil constitution of the clergy. We are all aware that the civil constitution of the clergy offended all Catholics in Europe. All Catholic states in Europe were not happy with that development. And therefore that explains why, for example, Austria joined the war against France. So in other words, all believers in the Catholic religion did not like the civil constitution of the clergy because it was an attack on the Catholic Church. So they ended up in war. Then you have, of course, the influence of the Reign of Terror. We all know what happened during the Reign of Terror. The Reign of Terror, many people died, but I'll focus on two. The death of the king of France that scared many other kings in Europe, made some monarchs to declare war on France because France had executed her own king and they felt that the same would happen, and that's why they attacked France. I also look at the death of Marie Antoinette. Marie Antoinette was the wife of the king, but she was executed during the revolution. And therefore, Austria, for that matter, fought because of the death of Marie Antoinette. But the other reasons, we have the death of Mirabeau, who was a personal friend to the king, but also he was a friend to the revolutionaries. So when he died, indeed many people were killed. Many people were killed, including the king. So now we can say that if Mirabeau had not died, perhaps the king would not have made the errors he made. And perhaps European states and European leaders would have no reason to fight with France. So the death of Mirabeau, in a way, was responsible for the war between France and her neighbors up to 1814. Then you have, of course, the rise of militarism. The rise of militarism here, we are talking about war, generally. France was ready to go to war. All other countries were also ready to go to war. And during that time, we had many reasons why France went to war. For example, we had when Napoleon went for the Egyptian campaign, it was because of militarism, the French militarism. When we also had when Napoleon went for the Egyptian campaign, all that was war. So if you look at the Italian campaign, that was war between France and Austria. But Egyptian campaign, that was war between between France and Britain, much as the war was fought in Egypt. So that was all because of militarism. Then you had the Nice Declaration, where European countries, or let's say European leaders, had a collective agreement to agree that they are going to fight with France. Then you have the execution of the royal family. I think that one's very easy to understand. Execution of the king. It's true that the king was executed in January 1793. But it is also true that the queen was soon also executed. So the execution of the two royal members of the French monarchy is partly why other countries or other people or other leaders in Europe decided to attack France. Then, of course, the rise of Napoleon is true. Napoleon engaged Europe in many wars. Before Napoleon rose to power, you remember, he went for the Italian campaign, sent by the French government. He also went for the Egyptian campaign, still sent by the French government. And when he came to power, he fought many other wars. For example, you should have heard about other campaigns that Napoleon fought. When he went for the Peninsular War, that was 1808, 1811, yes. Napoleon also went for the Moscow campaign, 1812, yes. So Napoleon was also the reason why France was at war with her neighbors, because of his war spirit. Then, of course, we had the continental system. We know how the continental system caused trouble between Napoleon and her neighbor and his neighbors. For example, the continental system caused the Peninsular War. The continental system caused the Moscow campaign. And the continental system later caused Napoleon's downfall. But the most important thing here is that the continental system caused the war between France and her neighbors. Then you have that one, the imprisonment of the Pope. Once Napoleon made that mistake of imprisoning the Pope, all Catholics and all Catholic states in Europe rallied behind each other to fight with Napoleon. For Napoleon had made something, he had done something unacceptable. For the first time, the Pope was arrested. The Pope was humiliated. And that is why France was at war, also with her neighbors. Then you have a European nationalism. In other words, European people who wanted independence, but independence from who? Of course, from France. So we are talking about how European people were fighting because they wanted what? Independence. So war became inevitable because of that. Then look at number 2 there. The violation of the Constitution of Charter was primarily responsible for the collapse of the restored Bourbon monarchy in France. So look at the preamble. What is expected of you? You're expected to analyze the degree to which the violation of the charter led to the collapse of the restored Bourbons. But also, you are expected to bring in other reasons that also led to the collapse of the restored Bourbons. So the standpoint is a must. You must write a standpoint there. So where do we start? When did the restored Bourbons come to power? Can I get some response? When did the restored Bourbons? When was the restored Bourbons? When did it start? Yes? Who knows when the restored Bourbon rule started? Okay? Right. The restored Bourbon monarchy was started in 18. I'm not seeing the hands. Yes? Okay. Okay. Right, just something very small here. When did the restored Bourbon start? I can see a hand in Gayaza Adventists. You want to say something about the restored Bourbons? The echo, we can't hear you well.
Master, I was asking. That would, do you mind repeating for us the introduction for the for number one that you've been discussing.
Question again. Can you repeat for me the question? There's a lot of echo where you are.
Like we are requesting for the introduction of the number that you've discussed.
Number one.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go back and we see the introduction for number one is here. The introduction for number one is there. So we are saying, read this paragraph under points to consider. Just read that paragraph, that European hostility against France manifested in the formation of a series of alliances against France in the period, e.g. the first alliance or the first coalition. We have from 1793 to 1797. We had the second military alliance or the second coalition, 1798 to 1802. And then we had the third coalition or the third military alliance between 1802 to 1807. And lastly, the fourth alliance or the fourth coalition, 1813 to 1814. So war between France and her neighbors was fought in coalitions. European countries would come together in a group to fight one country, that was France. I hope I have answered you. I'm just hoping I have answered you right. Okay, so let us go to number two now. We go to number two, and I was asking someone to give me what they know, to say something about the restored Bourbon monarchy. Anybody to say something? What do you know about the restored Bourbon monarchy? Anybody want to say something about the restored Bourbon monarchy in France? Who were the leaders? When did the restored Bourbon monarchy start their rule in France? And when did they stop ruling France? Yes, I can see a hand here. This is from, right, Gayaz again. Please go ahead.
King Louis the 18th and King Charles the 10th were the leader of the restored monarchy.
All right, thank you very much. Let me go to somebody here. This is Teacher Maria. Hello. Somebody say something. Yes, please go ahead. Teacher Maria, please go ahead. Okay, I got it. All right, so let me see, Shari. Shari, say something. Now, in case you cannot say talk here and maybe your mic is disturbing, you can send your response in the chat. I'll find the response there. So let us continue. I'm seeing people's hands, but I am not getting any response from them. Right, so let's see number two. We go to number two. The violation of the constitutional charter was responsible for the collapse of the restored bubbles. And here we are talking about the rulers who came to power in France after the downfall of Napoleon. These people came to power in 1815. And in France, one of the restored legitimate rulers was Louis XVIII. I hope we all remember that Louis XVIII was the elder brother of Louis XVI. So in France, Louis XVIII was restored and he was given a constitutional charter. The constitutional charter was now the constitutional charter was the constitution that was given to Louis XVIII to help him rule with ease. I have seen someone is asking me, that someone is asking me here to again give them the introduction. Let me just copy this very fast and I paste it there, because it seems people are writing and they are not getting it. So can we see that now? People are asking for the introduction in number 1. It's there. In case you are copying it direct, you can have it there. But the same document has been shared in chats, so you can access it there still. So let's go to number 2. So I said Louis XVIII was restored in France. Louis XVIII was given a constitution that was called the Constitutional Charter. Now, Louis XVIII rules France from 1815 up to 1824, and he dies. Then he was succeeded by his young brother, whose original name was Count d'Artois, the youngest brother of Louis XVI. But he changes his name to Charles X when he comes to power in France. So he rules France from 1824 up to 1830, when he was overthrown by the French Revolution. So these two rulers together are called the restored Bourbon monarchy, or the restored Bourbon rulers in France. So in this question, they are asking us to analyze how far the downfall of the monarchy was caused by the abuse of the the constitutional charter in France. And the answers are here. This question is two-sided and we need a standpoint. So the introduction is up there. They're saying, following the downfall of Napoleon and the signing of the Treaty of Chaumont, the Bourbons were restored in France with a constitutional charter, and that was in 1814. So after the downfall of Napoleon, the next set of rulers were the Bourbons, who were relatives of the original Bourbon dynasty in France. So they came back and were given a constitution, which constitution they violated. And the violation of that same constitution is what later led to their downfall. That means that Louis XVIII violated the constitution in many ways. When he died, Charles X also came and also continued violating the same constitution in many ways. And therefore, because of that, the monarchy was forced to collapse, or the monarchy collapsed in the face of such abuse of the constitution. So by 1830, the revolution broke out and the monarchy was no more. I am seeing someone is saying that I'm very fast. Right? Let me reduce the speed a little. So here, the charter was intended to prevent the return of the pre-revolutionary days. That was the intention of the charter. Now, according to the charter, according to the constitution, there was to be equality before the law. Now, this means that there was no equality in the face of the leaders. It is true the constitution demanded that people should be equal, but when you look and analyze into the leadership and role of the two leaders, you realize that they did not actually treat the people the way they wanted. So the Constitution was violated by both Louis XVIII and Charles X. So in a way, the revolution started in France. Let me see, there is a hand. Yes, Shadi, a question, you have a question or something to say?
Master, what is,
Yes,
how do the 1814 constitutional charter states?
question again, how do the what?
How do the 1814 constitutional charter states?
Like I have said in the first point here, I said that there was to be equality before the law for everyone. According to the constitutional charter, everybody was supposed to be equal before the law. Now the question should be, so who was treated in a different way? When Louis XVIII came to power, when Charles X also came to power, they restored the privileges of the clergy and the nobility. And therefore, that means that the peasants were still mistreated just like it was before the revolution. So that is now no equality before the law. And that is abuse of the Constitution. And that explains why many people remained grumbling until they revolted in 1830. So that is, I hope I have answered you. Then freedom from arbitrary arrests and imprisonment. According to the Constitution, nobody was supposed to be arrested and imprisoned without trial. But the truth is that when the two leaders were in power, the peasants were still mistreated like it was the case before the revolution. So again, that is partly why the monarchy was overthrown, or why it was short-lived. Also, according to the Constitution, equal opportunities were to be given to civil, military, and public offices. Equal to who? Equal to everyone, regardless of their background. But it is true that when the two leaders came to power, they favored the clergy, they favored the nobility, they favored some sections of the society at the expense of the peasants. So that is also another way they violated the Constitution, and that's why the monarchy collapsed. Also, there was to be religious tolerance. Whereas it is true that in France, the Catholics were the majority, it was also true that there were many other religions. So there was supposed to be religious tolerance in France, according to the Constitution. But over time, the Catholic Church regained its original what? Its original privileges. And therefore, the revolution broke out, or the regime collapsed because of favoritism, and the Catholics were favored more. So that was another way the Constitution was violated. Then you had freedom of press, freedom of speech, freedom of association. So the Constitution also laid that out very well. But when the two leaders came to power, they forgot about the people's freedoms. And therefore, they started again denying them the same freedoms. So the revolution broke out. The two leaders were overthrown. Right. Someone is asking me from Uringi. Uringi says, give us the standpoint. I'll give you the standpoint. I'll give you my standpoint. But before I give you the standpoint, I would like to ask something. Let me ask something here. Listen to me very well. I want you to give me your opinion here. I'm going to tell you a short story, and then you tell me your opinion. So this is the story. Once upon a time, there was a girl who was very clever, but she came from a poor family. So this girl went to school, and when she reached senior 3, she ran out of fees. There was no money to continue. And then this girl stayed home for some time, and a good Samaritan came and started paying for her school fees. And this good Samaritan, after the girl had finished school, wanted to marry the girl. And the girl also had no problem. Marrying someone who has paid your school fees, that's not a bad idea. So, on the day of graduation, the man who paid the school fees, of course, was invited. And then the parents were, of course, also there. And the girl was supposed to give a speech. And the question is now here. Who should the girl thank more? The person who paid her school fees or her parents? What do you think? Who deserves to be given more thanks? Before I give you my standpoint. Yes, can I have people give me their view? Yes. Let me see. What do you think? Yes. Can someone give me their opinion here? Who should be thanked more? The parents of the girl? Whom should we thank more? And tell us why. I can see someone from Kangulumira Public. Whom should we thank more? Yes? Kangulumira Public, please tell us what you think. Yes? Who are we supposed to thank more? Okay, I see Gayaza. Gayaza, whom should we thank more?
To a greater extent, we have to thank the parents, because if they never produced her.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me get someone from Kangulumra also to tell us who should be thanked more.
Thank you very much.
Yes?
To the greater extent, the parents should be appreciated because they are the one who produced that girl.
Okay, that's a good reason. Let me see if we can get another person with a different opinion. Anybody else with another opinion? Let me see if there are other hands down here. So you say that we should thank the parent more because the parent gave birth to the girl. Okay. How about if I say that you should thank the boy because the boy is the one who made the girl to finish school? You see, the parents had failed. Anyway, so my answer here in this is that it does not actually matter. Maybe the number of points you have managed to write, you should just give us your standpoint. That is your opinion. Like you said, that we thank the parents because the parents gave birth to the girl. That makes a lot of sense, you see? Whereas if another person comes up and says, we should thank the boy because the boy paid the school fees, the parents had failed. It also makes a lot of sense. So you find that everybody is right, whether you say to a smaller extent or you say to a bigger extent, it is still the same. I can see many people in the chats here, they are saying that the parents contributed more because they made the girl alive. The boy paid the fees, so we should thank the boy. And then, see, another one said we should thank who? The mother. Okay. So let's see. Someone is saying that, excuse me, facilitator, let others to be muting when they aren't presenting. Yes, that is true. If you are not presenting, your mic should remain muted. Right. So the standpoint can be either to a smaller extent, like in this case, you can say, to a smaller extent, the violation of the constitutional charter led to the collapse of the restored Bourbon. It is correct. Another person may say, a greater extent, the violation of the constitutional charter led to the collapse of the restored Bourbon monarchy. It is correct. So it doesn't really matter whose standpoint is weighing in which way. We just want to see that you know how to state the standpoint. That is it. I hope I have answered the person who was asking about the standpoint. That give us the standpoint for this question. So I hope I have answered you. Then let's see. According to the Constitution also, it granted the parliament a system of government with the two chambers. We had the chamber of peers and the chamber of deputies with the different requirements. Now, let's see how the two chambers would work. The truth is, over time, even this parliament was abolished, especially during the regime of Charles X. And therefore, the monarchy collapsed partly because the constitution did not follow the requirement as provided in the constitution that there should be a parliament in France. Then let's see how Louis XVIII and then Charles X continued violating the constitution. Right, now you see that Louis XVIII never forgot fame and prestige of the ancient regime. In other words, he remained a Bourbon at heart. Louis XVIII remained a Bourbon at heart. So he did not follow the constitution as it required. He revived absolute monarchism. This was especially during the regime of Charles X, who revived absolute monarchism. Then somebody still asking for the standpoint. So the standpoint for the question, which says, what is the question? I'm not getting the question yet. I am hoping you're going to write for me the question in the chat so that I respond. Please, if you're writing a comment in the chats, write everything you want. I'll go back, read, then I'll respond. So let's continue here. In 1816, there was a riot, we can say. The ultra-royalists decided to attack the Bonapartists in what popularly became known as the White Terror. And in this case, we had the supporters of the monarchy fighting against the supporters of Napoleon or the sympathizers of Napoleon. And therefore, in that case, we can also say that partly led to the downfall of the monarchy. In other words, we are looking now at the other factors, leaving alone the violation of the constitutional charter. We're looking at other factors that led to the downfall of the restored Bourbon monarchy. Then we had the revival of nobility and the clergy. This was by Charles X in 1825. He revived the nobility and the clergy with all their privileges. And that is partly why the monarchy faced a lot of resistance, and eventually it did what? it collapsed. By 1830, the revolution broke out partly because of such issues. I hope you still remember the tricolor flag. The tricolor flag that was introduced by the Frenchmen themselves. And I hope people are following events. Please follow events. Yesterday was Bastille Day. I hope people remember what happened on Bastille Day in France. Anyway, so the revolutionary tricolor flag was abolished. Do we still remember the three colors that made the revolutionary colors? Or let us say the tricolor flag was made up of which colors? Which colors made up the tricolor flag? Someone is asking here that when primarily is used, is it a must that you should use to a greater extent? I'll respond to that. Let us continue and see other factors. The abolition of the tricolor flag that was red, blue, and white. That flag was abolished. And what did they do? Of course, they restored the royal white flag. That was by Charles X. That was annoying to the people of France. And therefore they revolted or they started resistance until when the monarchy was overthrown because of the abolition of the revolutionary tricolor flag. But I hope you still remember that the same flag that the French adopted during the revolution is the same flag or the same colors that have maintained up to today. Then you had, of course, the appointment of Polignac, who was totally opposed to the white flag, and they censored the press. What does censorship of the press here mean? Do we still have cases of censorship of press here in Uganda today? Is the press censored? In Uganda, is our press censored or ours is free? Who wants to respond to that? Is our press censored or it is not? Yes, I'm seeing a hand, but I'm not seeing the person. Let me look for the person. Our press is censored. It is censored and highly censored, meaning that you don't just wake up and say anything. Otherwise, you're going to be caught up in the run because there will be no freedom after your speech. So even here press is censored, but here that means the regulation of what people share. Even here in Uganda, you must be very careful about what you share. So censorship in France was heavy. That's why people revolted. That's why the monarchy was overthrown. Then we had, of course, a narrow franchise, meaning that few people were able to vote because voting was based on ability to pay tax. People were unable to pay tax, were unable to vote. And therefore, because of that, people were not happy because of the condition of voting. So eventually, the monarchy collapsed. Then there were many restrictions on political liberties and freedoms of the people. It was not easy to belong to a political party, or it was not easy to carry out any political activity in France. During the regime of the restored Bourbons, many people were not happy with the lack of liberty, the lack of freedom in France, and that's partly why they revolted in 1830 and overthrew Charles X, and that marked the end of the restored Bourbon rule in France. Then there was the violation of the principle of equality. of opportunity, meaning that the nobility and the clergy were given higher opportunities, or let us say they were given better opportunities when it comes to appointments. And that's why the people of France were not happy. And that's why they decided to revolt. That's why the 1830 revolution broke out, and that is how they ended up overthrowing the restored Bourbon monarchy. Then you had attempted confiscation of the peasants' lands. You remember when Charles X came to power in France, and then he set up a compensation scheme where he would compensate the nobility and the clergy who had been in exile for some time, and then he would give them free money. That was not acceptable, or let us say that was not necessary. So the king decided to do that against the will of the people of France, and that explains why the monarchy was easily overthrown again also. Then let's see the next page. What does it say? So let me first go to the charts and I see what people are asking. When the question is primarily, is it a must that you should stick to the larger extent? All right. Now, there are many ways of writing a standpoint, and a standpoint is your own opinion, like we said earlier. It is your own judgment that you give based on the weight of your argument according to what you feel is heavy according to you. Now, there are conventional ways of writing a standpoint. In other words, the common ways of writing a standpoint. For example, you say the greater extent, a bigger extent, a larger extent. But where do you place the standpoint? You can place the standpoint in the introduction. You can also place the standpoint at the point when you're writing your transition statement. In other words, when you start writing, however, there are other factors, you can again re-emphasize your standpoint. And again, you can write your standpoint at the point when you're concluding your essay. Conclusion, again, you can write your standpoint. And then you have unconventional ways of writing the standpoint. For example, when you say entirely, you can, for example, say that the violation of the constitutional charter by the restored Bourbon monarchy entirely led to the collapse of the monarchy. It also means the same, like if you could say maybe to a greater extent. Or you can say mainly, or you can say primarily, etc. Now, don't base your standpoint on the number of points, but the weight of the argument. So the question is here, when the question is primarily, is it a must that you must say to a larger extent? When the statement primarily appears in the question, according to the opinion of the person who set the question, he has taken his point. He's saying that it primarily, for example, if I say that the French Revolution primarily led to the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte. Discuss. The French Revolution primarily led to the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte. Discuss. It means you're going to give us, you agree with that statement and give us the various ways the French Revolution led to the rise of Napoleon, and therefore in that case, the standpoint is predetermined. Yes. Someone is asking, was this charter the Vienna settlement? No, the Vienna settlement was not the charter. That's in the chat. Let me just respond to this very fast. No, the charter was different. The charter was different. The constitutional charter was not the Vienna settlement. The constitutional charter was given to Louis the 18th, and it was not the settlement. People? What do you mean by predetermined? It means that you are going to answer the question the way it appears. In other words, accept that it was primarily responsible and continue. Right, so let me go to the next question. The next one. This one. This one. All right, let's continue. How was Prince Metternich able to dominate Europe from 1815 to 1848? I think the key word here is dominate. We all know that 1815 to 1848 is popularly known as the Metternich era, and Metternich was the chief, or let us say the major personality during that time. Okay, let me see, is there any other response down here? So what was all about this charter? Someone is still asking what was in the constitutional charter. The constitutional charter was a constitution that was drawn by the peacemakers, of course, during the Vienna settlement, as a guiding document that was given to Louis the 18th to help him rule France. So that was mainly the constitutional charter. It was a document drafted by the peacemakers in Vienna and given to Louis the 18th to use it as a document that would help him to rule in a fair way. That was the constitutional charter. So let's see how was Metternich able to dominate the whole of Europe. Here you need to give us a brief background of Metternich, and you tell us how Metternich used a range of methods to remain dominant in Europe. It is true that from 1815, after Metternich called the Vienna Congress, all through up to 1848, when Metternich was overthrown by the 1848 revolutions, it is true that Metternich was the dominant personality in Europe. But, so the question is, how did he manage this? What did he do that made him dominate Europe so easily? For example, here we say Metternich used a range of methods. He suppressed liberalism. But how? How did Metternich suppress liberalism? I want someone to say something about how did Metternich suppress liberalism? Did he use the army? Did he use force? Did he use spies? What exactly did he do that made it possible for him to suppress liberalism in Europe between 1815 to 1848? They are saying Metternich suppressed liberalism, but how? Another question is here that was it Charles X or Louis the 18th who violated the Constitution? I'll respond to that. Both of them, not only one. Louis the 18th, like I said, in many ways he remained a Bourbon at heart. In many ways, he also violated the Constitution. But Charles the 10th violated the Constitution more than Louis the 18th. But when we are writing the answers, we blame them the same. And then we only mention their names as examples. So the person is asking for the previous question. Pardon to the previous question. I'm not getting which previous question. Maybe you'll type for me the question again. Please, if you want me to respond, ask the question direct. Type the question, I'll find it in the chat and I will respond. Right, so Metternich used many methods to suppress liberalism in Europe. We said Metternich used the army, Metternich used the police, Metternich used the tight spy network, but all that, it was because he was scared of liberalism. Metternich was scared that people would one day overpower him, and so he used a range of methods. Metternich also suppressed nationalism. The truth is that Metternich had, throughout his time when he was Metternich, when he was the ruler of Austria, Metternich was presiding over nationalities that wanted independence. For example, the Germans wanted independence and they were under Metternich. Also, the Italians wanted the same and they were all under Metternich. And therefore, Metternich suppressed nationalism. And the most important thing here we are saying that Metternich did it and he was doing it, and that's how he remained dominant. So throughout that time, the Italians could not do much, even the Germans could not do much. Then occasionally, Metternich used diplomacy. We all remember how Metternich called for the Vienna Congress. We all remember how Metternich hosted the Vienna Congress, and all remember Metternich's contribution in the Vienna settlement. So by doing so, Metternich remained dominant, but also Metternich remained a major player during the Congress system. So Metternich used a mixture of sometimes ruthless methods, or we could say force, and sometimes he could use diplomacy, and he remained dominant. So in other words, we are looking at the Metternich system. The same question can be set in other ways. I'll show you. Then we have Metternich also. Metternich used divide and rule. How does divide and rule work? Who can tell us how divide and rule works? They're saying he suppressed liberalism by using Metternich's system of, like the police, like censorship of the press. Yes, this is a good response. So Metternich used a range of methods. Thank you very much. I see this is Telconi. Then Metternich, of course, used the legitimate rulers, the one he had restored, like legitimate rulers in Spain, and then of course in Naples, many of them were working for him. So by doing so, he remained very, very dominant. Then also, Metternich promoted dictatorship. How did Metternich promote dictatorship? By supporting the restoration of these despotic legitimate rulers, Metternich promoted dictatorship. But in many ways, these same rulers who were restored by Metternich later became they became his fans, I could say, or they became also his supporters. And so Metternich remained very, very dominant in Europe during that time. Now, this response was given by someone earlier. Censorship of the press, we know what that means. Centralization of the European correspondences. In other words, Metternich made all correspondences all across Europe to pass through Vienna so that the letters would be opened. The content is read through before they were sealed and dispatched to their recipients. So Metternich was doing all that because he wanted to remain dominant. Then I see someone saying that introduction about this personally should take how many lines? In other words, how long should the introduction be? Who wants to say something about the introduction? How long should the introduction be? Should it take 5 lines? Should it take 2 lines? Or it should just be a whole page? Let me hear something from Gayaza Adventist. Yes? How long should the introduction be?
So far, the introduction, you have to write whatever you know about Metternich, and then you rate the question, then you give the standpoint, then you go to you answer the question.
Thank you very much. That is exactly what the introduction should be like. So don't concentrate and waste a lot of energy on the introduction. It is true the introduction should be there, but shouldn't be half a page. I would say maybe an introduction should not go beyond 6 lines. The introduction should not be too long because the points are not there. The points are in the body of the essay. So let's continue, and we say, Metternich used the tight spy network. We all know what the Italian woman said about the Metternich spy network. What did the Italian woman comment about the Metternich spy network? Yes. They are asking, someone is asking here that in respect to the previous topic of the restored Bourbon monarchy, how do we approach the question, the restored Bourbon monarchy learned nothing and forgot nothing? Who wants to respond to that? How do you approach that question? The restored Bourbon monarchy learned nothing and forgot nothing. They learned nothing from where? They learned nothing from the days after the revolution. In other words, they learned nothing from the post-revolutionary days, and they forgot nothing from the pre-revolutionary days. So as you answer that question, you got to give reference to the post-revolutionary days and the pre-revolutionary days. For example, they learned nothing from the fact that the revolution wanted people, or let us say the revolution wanted peasants to get land. So they learned nothing from that. But they forgot nothing from the pre-revolutionary days when the peasants did not have land. In other words, you're supposed to look at the mistakes that the restored Bourbons made. Metternich had a reliable army that was very strong. and it helped him to remain dominant because it helped him to weaken opposition. It helped him to weaken Italians and the Germans in many, many ways. There are lots of responses here. They're saying that for questions like Napoleon Bonaparte was a product beyond his own making. Let me read it the way it is. For questions like Napoleon Bonaparte was a beyond his own circumstance, discuss how do we approach such a question. Okay, I will make a small correction on the question. The question can be set in this way. Napoleon was a product beyond, Napoleon was a product of circumstances beyond his own making. Discuss. We all know that Napoleon was a product of many circumstances. Some of them were because of his own making, and of course some were because of other circumstances beyond his own making. Let me just give an example. Now you're going to give, you're going to write all the factors that led to the rise of Napoleon. Let us start from there. Then tick off the ones that you think Napoleon did not have anything to do with. Because you're now trying to separate circumstances beyond his own making and then circumstances that was because of his own making. For example, now you realize that luck, Napoleon was born lucky. So that if you look at it in that direction, it means Napoleon was a product beyond his own making because he was just born lucky. If you say Napoleon was ambitious, in other words, Napoleon was born ambitious. You don't make yourself ambitious. So if you look at ambition as one of the factors that led to his rise, again, that means Napoleon was a product beyond his own making. Let me give the last point on this area. Then we have Napoleon being, or Napoleon was supported by his friends and relatives. For example, his brother Lucien Bonaparte helped him greatly. Also, Napoleon was, he came to power because of his connections to other important people like Josephine Johannians. So even when you look at it in that direction, again, Napoleon is a product beyond his own making. So, in other words, that question rotates around the factors that led to the rise of Napoleon, but let us know that some of the factors, in fact, most of the factors, were because of circumstances beyond Napoleon's own what? Own making. Yes, someone has given me now here what the Italian woman said, that my daughter cannot even sneeze, but mechanically, no. That is what the Italian woman said. But I think that emphasizes the tight spy network that Metternich had. But that spy network made him very, very dominant, not only in Austria, all across Europe. Then you had the Congress system helped Metternich because Metternich was the brain behind the Congress system. Also, people should not forget that. Then you have the use of the quadruple and the quintuple alliances. I hope we remember the members of these two alliances. Of course, we had the quadruple alliance made up of Britain, Austria, Russia, and Prussia. And when France was added, the quadruple alliance now became the quintuple alliance. So someone is asking here, the Vienna Congress of 1815 was an unfair settlement. Discuss. Yes, that is a good question. Are you asking for the approach? Are you I'm not very sure what you want, but if you're asking for the approach, maybe, all right, the question is two-sided. So you're going to give us the introduction of the Vienna Congress. In other words, tell us when the Vienna Congress was called, where was it held, who were the different countries and states of people who represented the different states. And then you start by writing the factors, or let us say, writing the issues that show that the Vienna settlement was unfair. But the question is, unfair on who? You should have that at your fingertips. I hope you still remember that the Vienna settlement, the target country was France. But also know that during the Vienna Congress, the small states were disappointed. And therefore, you should have such examples at your fingertips that you are going to show how France was not happy in many ways, and also show how the small states were not happy in many ways before you bring in the achievements of the same, or achievements of the Vienna settlement, or the Vienna Congress for that matter. And I hope people know the difference between the two, the Vienna Congress and the Vienna settlement. There's a very big difference between the two. Whereas the Congress means the physical meeting that happened for close to a year. The settlement, on the other hand, means the outcome of the meeting. So we should know the difference between the two. I can see someone's hand is here from Saint what? Please go ahead and ask your question. You can ask, there is a question, there's a hand. Meanwhile, let me first see what people are saying in the chats. They're saying the achievements of the directorate government. Achievements of the directorate government. Then they say, what is the difference between the Vienna Congress and the Vienna settlement? I think I've answered that. I've already answered that. So let me first give a chance to this person. Okay. As we continue, someone was asking the difference. I have given the difference between the two. So let us continue, and we'll go to other questions. Yes. There's another. Someone is asking, what's the difference between to what extent was Napoleon a true child of the French Revolution, and to what extent was Napoleon a son of the revolutionaries? To what extent was Napoleon a true child of the French Revolution, and to what extent was Napoleon a son of the revolutionaries? It is not easy to separate the revolutionaries from the French Revolution. And therefore, to me, the two questions have the same demands. Yes. Then another question, assess the achievements of the National Assembly in France by 1792. Now, there are two documents I'm going to share with you that is going to answer many of these questions you're asking. I'm going to share with you a summary of most of the common questions and their answers, or at least the approaches. Then I will also share with you what I've shared with my students here, what I call the executive summary that has also very many questions in a more simplified way. I am going to share with people that. Let me see if I can share here. Maybe people should get this right away. Where is my executive summary? Okay, so people are going to get this. So, all right, you can get that. Section cannot be sent because it is currently in use. Okay, let me first share the other one. Okay, the summary that answers some of the questions that people are asking me right now. Okay, like this one. So look at this summary. There is a summary, there's a document I'm sharing. It's a Word document that has many of the questions that you are asking me. Then another question is here. How did Napoleon answer the wrongs of the French revolutionaries? You are going to get the answers to those questions in that summary, that document I have just posted. And there's another one I'm going to post. It failed to load because I'm using it, but at the end of the session, I will share it with you. At the end, I'm going to share it with everybody. Then, where are we? We are here. There's another question. Which one? Make that. Okay, this one. Okay, so the document is there. People can see it and you can be using it. You see, that is what I wanted you people to see. So our next question. Our next question is here. What does it say? Our next question is number 5. Number 5, what does it say? Number 5. Examine the causes and consequences of the Greek War of Independence. Examine the causes and consequences of the Greek War of Independence. I want someone to say something about the Greek War of Independence. What do you remember about the Greek War of Independence? Someone say something, chap chap. We have only 8 minutes. 8 minutes, somebody say something about the Greek War of Independence. Yes? We are not seeing the document. This one. I believe this one as well. This one I'm still in use. Okay, so it can't go. So can you share those ones in the chats? Okay, then let me see, there's a question here. The standpoint to that question, how do you state it? Which one is that question? Let me just see the question you're asking. I think I should now focus on the questions people are asking now. Okay, the king's flight to Venice sowed the seeds for his death. Discuss. I think this is about the death of the king. In other words, the death of the king was largely caused by the king's own attempted escape to Venice. So you show that various ways the king caused his own death by trying to escape, and then you bring in other factors that led to his death. Then again here they're saying that how successful was Bismarck in isolating France between 1871 up to 1890? The question is two-sided. They want you to show the various ways Bismarck was successful and the various ways he was also not successful. And of course, it requires a standpoint. Then again, how did the information of the Triple Alliance influence the history of Europe? How did the formation of the Triple Alliance influence the history of Europe up to 1914? We all know that one of the causes of the First World War was the alliance system. In other words, they're asking us, how did the formation of the various alliances, but in particular here, the Triple Alliance, how did it affect Europe? I think the major effect here is felt when the First World War broke out. But there are other things that happened before the First World War broke out. Then someone saying, we are not seeing the documents. Features of the economic depression. You're going to find this in the documents that are going to be shared shortly. Then how did the formation of the Triple Alliance influence the history of Europe? That one I've responded. How did the external factors contribute to the success of the Greek revolt? You'll also find that in the document that will be shared shortly. I think the two documents have been shared already, you can see. We have the revision, and then you have the executive summary. Please download those documents. In fact, I suggest you print those documents. It will help you to do your revision much faster. Someone is asking, to what extent did the United Nations succeed in solving international conflict? You're going to find this in the executive summary. The answers are there. How were the European powers able to recover from the Great Economic Depression? You're going to find it in the executive summary. So most of the questions people are asking here, the answers are in the two summaries I have shared. Someone is asking, how do you state a standpoint to a kind of a question which requires causes and effects? Like which question? It's easier for me when you have written the question, or if you have the question with you. Otherwise, for now, I'm just imagining the kind of question you want from me. So people, it's almost time. We have only 2 minutes. This session has been recorded. For people who have not been able to attend, you'll find it in the recording. And for the documents, people who may want me to share the 2 documents in case you have failed to download, let me give you my numbers. My number is 0772199377. And also you can get me on 0704141763. In case you want any help, or in case you want that document in your WhatsApp, you can get it. That document is available. You can still have it in case you want it. It has been, the numbers, please write 0772199377. That is one number. Another number, 0704141763. Please, in case you need any help, you can come to my inbox on my WhatsApp and I will give you the necessary support. Yes. Have a good day. Stay blessed. Yes, and given them my number. I have also, I think Diana has shared the 2 documents. Are there more questions? In case there are more questions, please, you can send the questions in the chat.
Yes, sir. Good evening. I'm from Kasese Muslim Secondary School.
Yes.
I was inquiring about the examination zones for the zones where I can how they set.
Ask the question again.
I was inquiring about how they set the papers for the zones where they get some questions, then I can prepare well for history.
How the questions are set.
Yeah, and from which zones?
Hey.
Yes.
All right. A quick one. So there are many different ways that teachers break down the content. Other teachers decide to break them according to themes that are related and connected. For example, we have revolutions. There are many revolutions. We have, of course, the French Revolution, the 1830, the 1848, the Russian Revolution, 1917. So that now forms one theme. So you find they break it in that way so that they set at least 1 or 2 questions from there. Then, of course, you have wars. Any war, whether World War II, World War I, Franco-Prussian War, Greek War of Independence. So there will always be a question about a war. Then we've got personalities. Those ones are very many. Personalities like Napoleon, Metternich, Louis Philippe, all those personalities. That is also yet another theme. Then, of course, we have the 2 dictators. We have Mussolini and Mussolini and Adolf Hitler. Those ones are also another way, the 2 topics, any of them can be said. Then, of course, we have settlements and peace bodies. That is the Vienna Settlement, Versailles, League of Nations, Congress system, and the UN. Also, a question must come from there. And then, of course, we have the standalone topics. Standalone topics, I'm talking about topics that are not in any way connected with each other. For example, we have the Weimar Republic, and then we have the Weimar Republic, the economic depression. So any of those can also be set. So maybe to make it easier for you, like I shared my number, you can come to my inbox. I think that breakdown, I have it. I can also share it with you in your inbox and you share with your friends. Use my number. Any other question? In case there is no other question, I think let us stop here. I know we shall meet another time. you come to my inbox and we can talk more. Have a good evening.
So, thank you so much, Teacher Okelo, for the wonderful presentation. We are really very grateful and we can't thank you enough. We want to thank all the schools that have been able to join this evening. Thank you so much for joining. We are going to share all the questions and then the proposed answers to the different WhatsApp groups such that teachers can be able to share with you on your notes board and in your respective schools. Tomorrow we shall continue with another session, and for your friends who are doing applied mathematics, that is the session we shall have tomorrow. Then Friday we shall have geography, and then we shall have other sessions this week. We want to thank you so much for attending this session. Those who may still have some other questions, kindly check on that PowerPoint that has been shared in the chat to send all those questions to that WhatsApp number. Teacher Okelo will be in position to respond. And if possible, you can also give him a call in case it requires a lot of explanation. I want to thank you so much. Let us catch up tomorrow. We want to thank all the school administrators that have been able to join their students online. We are really very grateful. Kindly continue sending those pictures from your respective schools such that we can be able to use them when writing our reports to give feedback to the different stakeholders. Thank you so much and we wish you a good evening. The recording will be shared via YouTube for those who may have some other things to look out for. Have a nice evening.